Good morning to everyone. It's great to be here. It's my first IWEA conference, and I'm very happy to be here also for Senvion as the main sponsor today. So yeah, just about myself, obviously from the accent, I'm Irish, but I've been the last 10 years in Hamburg, in Germany, working in onshore wind, and at the moment I'm responsible for the German, Austrian and Polish markets for Senvion, and I've basically brought Senvion into the auction system in Germany. And so I'd like to give you a bit of an overview today of what we've learned as a company from those experiences, and hopefully it'll be a food for thought for the discussions that are going on here in terms of the auction system. Okay, so a few obligatory words about Senvion. So Senvion is one of the leading OEMs in Europe. We started off in 2001 in the north of Germany, and we basically grew in the community wind segment, and which was basically the pioneering segment in the German market. And we developed from there, went international, went offshore. We have a gigawatt of offshore assets operating, and globally we now have 18 gigawatts installed. And we're active, in a lot of countries at the moment. We have building sites in from Australia to South America, Europe, of course. We're building in Ireland at the moment. We came into the Irish market in 2017, and it's definitely a focus market for us. We've got the first 4 projects, and the full team is here in the audience today, and looking forward to meeting you. Otherwise, in terms of product, we have everything which is maybe unique, from 2 megawatts to 6 megawatts. And we're happy to talk to you about Senvion and the products later on today. But I think I should move into the actual topic of the presentation today, and that's auction systems and what we've learned. So if you look at the slide here, I've just taken a selection of auction markets in terms of auction volumes and pricing. And I guess, the trend which probably nobody has missed over the last 2 years is this move from basically flat feed-in tariffs, fairly generous, to fairly ungenerous auction systems. In Germany, 6 gigawatts have been auctioned to date. We saw that the price for electricity halved at a certain point. In India, the price at the moment is €35 per megawatt hour, which is far below the wholesale price. So this move to auction systems has had a big effect on the industry. And what I'd like to do is just give you a sort of a deep dive insight into 3 markets which are of particular importance to Senvion. And that's obviously Germany, which I'll come to at the end, and also India and the UK. Okay, so starting off with India. So India is has the most auction experience worldwide. So they've auctioned 12 gigawatts of capacity so far. And you could say India is basically a low wind market, capacity constrained. So the projects are limited more by the grid capacity rather than space. And the feed-in tariff which they had was swapped out for an auction system in 2017. And the government basically started auctioning 25-year PPAs. If you look at what happened in terms of pricing, so the pricing dropped to the wholesale level at about €45 per megawatt hour in the first auction. So that was about 20%, but it kept falling after that. So now we're at a level of €35 per megawatt hour, so considerably lower than the wholesale electricity price. If you look at the installations, so on the top right of the slide, they dropped by about 25% after the first, or after the introduction of the auction. But we believe that will pick up again, largely because India has a very strong build-out target for wind and renewables. They want 60 gigawatts by 22. So we as a company expect a 5 to 8 gigawatt market going forward. What's always important in an auction system is will realization be high? And in India, we do expect high rates of realization because bids are tied to permits on the one hand, and also technology has to be available. So technology, the turbines themselves have to be registered and certified by the government. and the projects need to be built within 18 months. So it's good for the industry, for the OEMs obviously, but also for the developers that the system is robust in that sense. And what we've won so far at auction with our customers is over 1 gigawatt of projects. I guess the main overarching success factor from a Senvion point of view was local production, not because there was a local content requirement, but in order to get the costs down to a competitive level, you need to produce locally and use local labor. So that was a main success factor. Otherwise, we basically in all of our projects organized the land leases and development rights, which is very unusual. We don't really do that in any other market. And that was basically one of the keys in India. All of our sites had wind above 7 meters per second. And very important was that the projects all were linked to the Green Corridor. And the Green Corridor is basically an Indian government transmission network to get power from producers to consumers, and anybody connected into that grid basically was curtailment free for the 25-year of the PPA. So that was a big bonus for the system. So we're building a factory now in India, and we see a very bright outlook for the market. Moving on then to the next, let's say, case study, that would be the UK. So the UK, I guess you could say, in terms of auction experience, was fairly short-lived, maybe short but sweet. So the UK introduced in 2015 a CFD auction to replace the very successful ROC system, which I'm sure you're all aware of, which was very good in terms of supporting installation. And the CFD, so contract for difference, is basically a contract for a PPA at a strike price. So the operator gets a guaranteed price level, and the government subsidizes the difference between that strike level and the wholesale electricity price. Yeah, we saw there was only one auction round in the end, and we saw that the prices went from about €104 per megawatt hour down by 10% to 93. The bids were then split into two lots and were the two lots or pots, they got the same pricing. So, I mean, prices came down, but they were still very much higher than the wholesale electricity rate. And I guess nobody knows what would have happened after that. The subsidy or the system was stopped, and you can see in the installations, if you go just take a look at the top right of the slide, installations basically dropped off a cliff, and some CFD projects from this round might still be built this year, but otherwise the market has dried up. And what we're doing as a company now is looking at corporate PPAs, subsidy-free projects, which are beginning to take off, but of course on a smaller scale than what we saw beforehand. In terms of realization, so the system in the UK was quite robust. You needed basically a ready-to-build project. So you needed a permit, you needed a grid connection. So we expect that nearly everything that was auctioned will be built. And also, in terms of realization time, there was a limit on it. So basically, until the end of 2019, all the projects need to be built. Looking at what were our success factors for the projects where we won, I guess you could say that close cooperation at an early stage was the key. So we went into financial modeling with our customers at a very early stage and looked at how we could optimize sites with site-specific power curves, noise curves, and transport concepts. So that worked well. In the end, we won 40% of all the available tariffs, so that was 304 megawatts. And I guess overall, if you wanted to talk about a trend, it's probably fair to say that the trend was that there was no trend. All types of projects and customer segments won something. So we had 3 turbine projects, up to 50 turbine projects, small developers, medium developers. So it was a mixed bag, which is a good sign for a healthy industry. And unfortunately now we have nothing to replace it. But obviously we're working hard on subsidy-free projects and hope that the UK government will come up with some sort of a new system. Okay, so then the last market is Germany, and this is obviously where I'm most up to date. German market basically was since 2001, when the first renewable energy feed-in tariff law was introduced. It's been one of the biggest markets worldwide. So it was a 2 gigawatt market, at least for as long as I can remember. And between 2012 and 17, it was actually a 4 gigawatt market on average. So the system worked very well in terms of wind build-out. And obviously when the auction system started being discussed, there was a lot of apprehension in the market, and this turned out to be quite justified. So in 2017, the auction system was introduced, and basically a very generous feed-in tariff, you could say, was replaced by an auction system auctioning 20-year PPAs. And the auction price was not fixed, it was adjusted according to site quality. So everybody bid on a reference site, and then if the actual site was, for example, better, i.e. had higher wind, the tariff would get scaled down, and if you had a low wind site, the tariff would get scaled up to about 130% of the actual reference bid. In terms of qualifying, so you needed a building permit, which was good, although there was an exception, and I'll mention that in a second, and you needed bid bonds. So everybody basically needed a permit, except for community wind schemes. So in order to sort of give a benefit to community wind, they were given an exemption from having a permit, and they had a longer realization period, which in general is good because, you know, Senvion grew into a large company in this community wind segment, but unfortunately there was a loophole in the system, and in the end, a small handful of developers, basically professional developers, hijacked the system and structured their projects as community wind. The result of that you can see now in the pricing. So if you look in one of the top charts on the left, the price went from 84 euro per megawatt hour down to 57 in the first auction round. And by the end of the year, we were at 38 euro per megawatt hour. So basically, you know, the price had more than halved. And the reason for this was that these developers who had structured their projects as community wind were basically speculating on technology in the future. So they didn't have a clear turbine in mind. They just assumed, you know, in 4 years' time that technology will be available to support this bid level. And basically, a lot of these projects, if not, you know, the vast majority, won't ever get built. So the first auction was or the first year of auctions was a disaster. And you can see, if you look at the top right of the slide, the installations, they've dropped by half. So in 2018, we had 2.4 gigawatts, down from 4.8 in 2016. So horrible, to be honest, for the industry. You know, across the board, from OEM to developer to service providers. And and then you see maybe at the bottom of the slide here, you see then a price increase in the 12 months, in the last 12 months. So what's the reason for that? Well, the reason for that is that the government then closed this community wind loophole. So from 2018, basically onwards, everybody needed a building permit, and that meant that, you know, the tariffs went up to reflect the level at which existing technology could produce electricity at. So in 2018, we had a kind of a more rational auction system, and basically everything which was permitted got a tariff, which is very good. Those projects will also get built. The problem is that now we have a system or a situation where the auction volume exceeds the available projects. So basically, in 2016, 17, people stopped permitting projects because of A, the uncertainty about what the auction system would look like, and then B, when the auction pricing went so irrational, people just stopped permitting. And so now there aren't permits available, and we've had an undersubscription of up to 50% in the last two rounds. So very unfortunate for the industry. 2019 looks similar to 18, probably a market of 2 to 2.5 gigawatts, and we're hoping then that 2020 and 21 things will pick up again. On a good note, we were happy that all of our projects got through then in 2018, so we've won 340 megawatts of tariffs in Germany so far. But of course, we've taken a hit, as of all manufacturers and players in the market, and we're missing basically half the market volume which we were used to. So so I guess there's a lot, a lot to be learned from Germany's venture into the auction world. And these 5 things you see on the screen are basically the 5 key takeaways from my experience, from our experience as a company in the German market. The first point, that system design will have a wide-ranging impact. So I think, when governments introduce an auction system, they're looking to reduce the subsidized or the subsidy level, but we saw in Germany that the market volume decreased dramatically. Even technology development cycles were impacted because manufacturers started developing new turbines at a much quicker rate than they had in order to get down to this level, this very low level we saw in 17. Public acceptance actually suffered too, as an indirect consequence. Before the auctions came in 16, there was a big push for permits. So in December 2016, 5 gigawatts, so in 1 month, 5 gigawatts were permitted, which was huge. And now we're basically, as an industry, experiencing a backlash because permitting authorities, the public, sort of wildlife protection agencies, they're all sort of pushing back after that experience in 16. So these are all things which I'm sure the government and the regulators in Germany, didn't expect to happen, but they did. So a very important point. The second point then is that you need a holistic approach when designing an auction system. So in Germany, we saw the structure itself for getting the prices down, that was okay, but nobody thought about keeping the supply of projects up. And so basically an auction system doesn't work unless you have a very robust supply of projects. And that's what was missing in Germany, and that's what's going to take years to get back. The third point, technology is key to lowering costs sustainably. That's important because in 2017 we saw that there's a very natural limit to how low you can get the cost of energy per kilowatt hour down with available technology. If you want to sustainably reduce the cost of energy, you need to support new technology. You need bigger rotors, bigger towers, and bigger rated power. So the planning framework needs to support a reduction in cost of energy. The fourth one then, I guess that's fairly self-explanatory. The less exceptions to the rule, the better. So it was one loophole in the German auction system, one exception to the rule, which basically ruined the whole thing. So the more robust a piece of legislation is, the better. And number 5, that uncertainty will have a long-term effect. We've seen the industry go from a boom in 16 to a bust in 18, probably a bust in 19, and then a gradual improvement and hopefully normalization in 21. But that's a big impact, and that's something which has an effect on jobs, on investment in the country. I think that's something definitely to bear in mind at the present here in Ireland, where there's still the possibility to influence the auction system. Okay, so that's it from my side. I hope that was of interest to you. Thanks very much for listening, and I look forward to meeting you today and tomorrow. And as I said, the team is here also, and we look forward to speaking to you. Thanks very much.